Thank goodness it's time to start tasting. So, if you have the 6-bottle course, you're going to want to have 2 to 3 ounces of the Sauvignon Blanc and 2 to 3 ounces of the Chardonnay in your glasses. I want you to take a moment here. We all have opinions and thoughts about wine. Absolutely, that is the whole point. But for this course, I really want you to pull those opinions back and instead push forward your observational skills. We're going to be practicing the 4-step method, tasting different styles of wine today, and in that process, you're going to be tuning your tools, okay? So if you had the 3-bottle course, just fast forward ahead to the GSM blend page and we'll see you there. For the rest of us, 6 wines, 2 to 3 ounces each. That's 18 ounces of wine. That's almost an entire bottle. So if you are planning on driving tonight, definitely use one of these, okay? All right, cool. First wine, the Sauvignon Blanc. Take that, open to the page on the tasting of the white wines, and we'll just dive right in using the 4-step tasting method. Grab your glass, hold it over the color, and take a look at the color of this wine. Look at it over a white background and try to assess what you're looking at in the hue. We have some colors there you can look at. There's straw, yellow, or gold. What does this wine most look like to you? You know, when I look at this wine, it matches up very, very closely with that image of medium straw in the printed booklet. So there we go. We just did a color assessment of the wine. It is medium straw. Now you know, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, you have put a notch in your knowledge belt on wine, and you can keep that in your repertoire right there. The next thing you do looking at wine, I give it a good swirl. You're either doing this because you're lonely or you're looking at the alcohol level in the wine. Because white wines are served chilled, they generally don't show the legs as much because they're not warmed up enough and their evaporation isn't as high. But my wine is showing a little bit of legs for me, but not very much. It's not super viscous. It's actually pretty watery in general, but there is some tears forming on the side of the glass. So that's it. We've just assessed the look of wine, just like that. How easy was that? Okay, next is smell. Take that same glass and you might try my technique. I'm sure you'll have your own and you'll develop your own, but this is what works for me and it might work for you too. First thing I do is I take a quick whiff and I think about what I just smelled. Was that a lot of intensity of aroma or not very much intensity of aroma? Wow! That wine was like pew, all out of the glass. There was a lot going on in that initial whiff test. I would say this to me is a high intensity wine. So there we go. Next, sniffs. This is where we're going to try to pick out flavors in wine. This is the hardest thing to do if you haven't been able to do it before. I'll show you how I do it, and it might work for you too. So what I like to do is I'll go into the glass. I'll take a whiff. I'll pull it out of the glass, and I'll think about what I just smelled. I'll imagine that smell, and I'll try to remember that smell and think about what it reminded me of. I'm often closing my eyes when I'm smelling wine because I don't want anything to distract me from imagining what I just smelled. And it actually completely removes the wine for me. Like, I'm no longer smelling wine. I'm smelling whatever it is that I just smelled. So if you want to try that, you might actually try pausing me because I'm going to start rattling off flavors in a moment. But I'd like you to try to find 3 fruit flavors and 3 other flavors. Flavors other than fruit. And then we'll meet back up again and I'll run through the tasting on this particular wine. All right, let's do it. Okay, for me, I'm going to run through these flavors here. Citrus fruits, tree fruit melon, tropical fruits, flowers, herbal, earth, and other very quickly. Citrus fruits. Do I get any citrus fruit in this wine? Yeah, you could say there is like a slight lemon lime characteristic, but it is very sweet to me. It's very sweet. In fact, if I think about it more, I'm moving more towards tree fruit in its profile. In fact, it almost tastes like saucy peaches. It's very peachy to me. This is a very peachy wine. Sweet fruit for sure. Tropical fruit? Yeah, I could imagine maybe guava or kiwi almost as a flavor. One tropical fruit is for sure, and that's passion fruit. I get some passion fruit in this wine, and that's very noticeable. Let's move on to flower smells. Okay, now I don't think I've ever smelled one of these in the wild, but elderflower liqueur. This has a very strong note of elderflower in it. So there we go. I've already named a bunch of fruits, and I'm already onto the others with the flower smell. Let's go into herbal notes. All right, this is where this wine sings. Herbal aromas, thinking of a freshly cut grass lawn, like your neighbor's mowing the lawn, and it's a cool spring day. Gooseberries. Have you ever had a gooseberry? They're like this weird green berry thing. Buy one and try one when they come out. They're amazing. I almost get this funny flavor of like fresh tarragon, like you touched a leaf of fresh tarragon and you're just smelling the oils of that tarragon. It's very herbal smell. Then, this is gonna sound weird, it's almost sage-like, but not quite, like almost. And what I think is interesting is that sagey sort of flavor kind of goes into this minerality note that I'm getting in this wine. I would almost describe it as freshly wetted concrete, you know, like right after a summer rain. It kind of has this note to it, and that is the minerality in this wine. Now, on this tasting, you'll see that it mentions oak and aging, but I don't get vanilla notes. I don't get any nut flavors. I don't get any creme brulee, caramel, nothing like that. I don't know. I don't think that this wine has a lot, if any, oak aging, okay? So there we go. We have totally assessed the smell in this wine. We've named a milieu of flavors. I hope you are writing down your flavors in notes. And now we can move on to the tasting part. Thank goodness. All right. When you take a taste, take a big swig of that wine, really swish it around your palate, all over your palate, and feel. You're looking for a couple of things with white wines. You're going, okay, is it sweet or is it dry? Next thing you're going to pay attention to is that sourness in the wine. How tart does it feel? You're going to feel it like it's tingling acidity on your tongue. Then rub your tongue to the roof of the mouth and feel that texture that's there. Is it an oily texture or is it kind of crunchy? And then finally, we're looking at the length, the overall length of the wine. Okay, got it? Ready, set, let's do this. I did swallow a little. Now I'm still tasting this wine, and it's already been about 13 seconds, and I'm still tasting it on my palate. I feel this tingle that goes over the length of this wine. All right, that was crazy fun, right? We just tasted that wine. Now, think about your tongue, that texture of your tongue to the roof of your mouth. What do you feel there? Is that a sharper flavor? It's a crunchy, or is it more oily smooth? Okay? Was there sweetness? When you had that initial burst of wine, it was pretty fruity, wasn't it? But it still tasted dry. Like it was, it's still dry. So this wine to me is dry. Maybe it's not bone dry, but it's definitely on the dry spectrum, okay? And then finally that length. I tasted it for about 13 seconds before it really dropped off to another layer. You can do something if you don't like to, you notice how I pointed at myself when I was slurping? You can slurp if you feel confident, but if you're worried you're going to choke, one thing you can do is when you swallow the wine, breathe in through your mouth and then out through your nose. And you'll actually get some aromas coming through the back, the retronasal passage of your nose. And that's another great way to do it, essentially the exact same thing. And it's a lot more appropriate looking. So now that we have all of that in our mind, let's take another taste of this wine and see where it takes us. Wow, acidity, right? You really get that explosion, especially on the second taste, where we really feel that crunchiness of this wine from the glitzy acidity that's there. Yes, this is a higher acid wine. We're feeling that tingle on our palate. Body-wise, I did get some body up front, but then it finishes clean and dry on my palate. So I would say this is a lighter bodied wine for sure. Okay, now we're talking textures. We're feeling that texture in our mouth. We feel the glitz, and I really think this wine is an acidity-driven wine. It leaves your palate refreshed. It leaves you like wanting another sip, which is why New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is so gluggable. Now, that's a very interesting thing when we start talking about Sauvignon Blanc in this taste profile that we've just experienced. Yes, Sauvignon Blanc tends to be high acid. It's a higher acid wine. Yes, the alcohol level, we're not so much feeling in that wine. That's not as important as the acidity play and how it feels on our palate. What's interesting about this wine is it actually does have some residual sugar. It has about 5 grams per liter of residual sugar, and that we feel not as sweetness, but more like body and texture in this wine that might not have been there if that residual sugar wasn't there. Because Sauvignon Blanc can be so high acid, especially in New Zealand, it's pretty popular decision, winemaking decision, to do that and leave a couple of grams per liter of residual sugar to make a wine that tastes more balanced across our palate. It's the same kind of thing that happens when you make your own lemonade and you don't add enough sugar and it's just like, too tart. So the same kind of thing is happening there too. So Sauvignon Blanc, in the realm of wines and white wines, Sauvignon Blanc is considered a light-bodied white wine. There are hundreds and hundreds of other grapes out there that are similar to Sauvignon Blanc in a lot of ways. I would say in the light-bodied white wine realm, Sauvignon Blanc is one of the bolder styles. We noticed lots of high-toned aromatics. We noticed a pretty explosive flavor when we first tasted the wine that really was more in the front of the palate versus the back of the palate. So this is a bolder, light-bodied white wine. But other wines like it, you might like Gruner Veltliner from Austria or Vermentino from Italy and southern France. You might be interested in some maybe lighter and less green flavored wines. You might move into something like Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio, same grape by the way, and you might even branch out and try something like Assyrtiko or Albarino. These are amazing white grapes and they're lots of fun to drink and they have a similar profile, and each one of them has their own unique varietal taste. So for Sauvignon Blanc, this guy is known for its herbaceous flavors. So those flavors of gooseberry and tarragon we were tasting, and that note of passion fruit we got on this wine is really a profile associated with Sauvignon Blanc. Each one of these grapes has a slightly different profile, and this is what makes this wine unique. Okay, I had fun tasting that wine, but let's move on to the next wine, the Chardonnay.